Chapter 11 in your textbook is talking about collecting information with field research. And so this presentation is going to discuss the benefits of field research. And I'm going to be using the example of Mothman to discuss. Field research is one of the best ways to learn about a topic, and it's through conducting field research that you will actually get candid answers. You can also come back and ask more questions based on the answers when you're doing interviews. Field research involves interviews, it involves observations. There are so many things that you can do and things that you can gather, and all of these things, conducting the research through interviews, collecting information through observations, those are also primary sources. And so on page 173 in your textbook, it says, field research is sometimes the best way to learn about an issue or collect information to support a position. And I would have to agree. So first we're going to look at the written reports from Linda Scarberry, Mary Millay, and Roger Scarberry. Now remember, Linda, Mary, and Roger were the three people out of the four who initially encountered Mothman on that fateful evening outside Point Pleasant, West Virginia. So we have Linda Scarberry's account, and all three of these accounts are on display at the Mothman Museum. And so I took pictures of the written record. And so Linda Scarberry provided a written record, a police report, shortly after witnessing Mothman on November 1966. Hers is handwritten and it was done in dark ink. Mary Millay's is different. She also wrote her account, but she wrote it in blue ink, which is very important. This is why lawyers like blue ink, because it's easy to figure out which one is the original. And again, both Linda's and Mary's observations, what they witnessed, what their statement was, are posted in the Mothman Museum. And then Roger Scarberry, he drew what he thought was Mothman, and he said it was 6 to 7 feet tall. It had these black eyes and these strange wings. And again, this picture is also in the museum. Underneath the handwritten eyewitness account, somebody typed up a transcript of what they said. So here you see a horse. Then we all returned home. We stayed together most of the time. About 9:30 that evening, we heard that it was seen at Thomas's, so we went directly up there, and the men took their guns that night. We saw tracks up there, and we went home about 12:30, and we all stayed together that night. The next day was Thursday, and we went back with the TV reporters, and all the men looked in the building and came back to talk to us when they heard a clang in the building, and went back to investigate the noise, and one of the doors of the boilers had been opened. That evening we all went back. The reporters from the Messenger went up. While they were all looking at the building, Linda saw the eyes in the field. Mrs. Heyer also saw the eyes. Mrs. Heyer, if you'll remember, is the reporter who was actually staying in Point Pleasant and was writing the articles for the AP Wire stories. And so you can read these, and you can see as you're reading them, they really weren't that scared. That's what makes it important to look at these transcripts and to listen to the eyewitness accounts and to read their words, because even though they're not being interviewed and you can't hear the inflections in their voices, by reading this, they kept going back. They kept going back to see if they could track it. That's not fair. Then they also, in this book, Mothman, The Facts Behind the Legend, they have the handwritten eyewitness report, they have the transcript, and then they also have text that was written in the book supporting what they saw. And so this is actually the interview that Linda Scarberry did in 2001. with Donnie Sargent, who is the co-author of the book, and she says, Linda, it was about 7 feet tall. It had wings that were visible on its back. The tips of the wings could be seen above its shoulders. The body, it was like a slender, muscular man and was flesh-colored. Its wings were an ashen white in color. The wings looked like angels' wings. Its face couldn't be seen because the eyes simply hypnotized you when you looked at them. You didn't have to look directly into them. If you looked close to its face, your eyes were drawn to its eyes. It wasn't that it didn't have a head, it just that when your eyes got close to its head and neck area, the eyes consumed your vision, and you couldn't see anything but them. It had arms and legs like a muscular man. When we first saw it, we had just topped a hill in the TNT area, and when the headlights of our car hit it, it looked directly at us as if it was scared. It had one of its wings caught in the guide wire near a section of the road close to the power plant, and was pulling on its wings with its hands, trying to free itself. Its wings were really big, its hands were really big. It was really scared. We stopped the car and sat still while it was trying to free itself from the wire. We didn't sit there long, just long enough to scare it, I think. Does she sound scared? No, she doesn't. Not at all. And so through this, we know she's either embellished the story because now they're going to be the heroes of the people who go out and track him, or this might actually be what happened and they really weren't scared in the first place. But, you know, the media hype. Excuse me. So I created a table, which I showed you a couple weeks ago, to compare the different stories. And so we have Linda Scarberry in 1966. She said that they were riding through the TNT. And then Linda on July 11th, 2001, she's talking about how it was cold, both couples were in the car, and it had one of its wings caught in the guide wire. Well, we didn't hear that story in 1966. In fact, none of the blogs that post about this mention the hands or the wings in a guide wire with the hands trying to free it. When you create or when you pull together the different interviews and the different transcripts and you start looking at them, set up a table to see where the inconsistencies are, because I'm betting you're going to find some. And right there, that diminishes the credibility of this witness. So why do you conduct an interview? Well, you can sometimes obtain additional, sometimes contradictory information. You can ask questions for things you can't locate information on. And interviews are relatively easy to conduct. You can conduct an interview either via Skype, or you can actually write questions and have the person write answers back to you. But when you're having a conversation with somebody, different questions come into your mind as follow-up questions. And so the interview may provide more information than you initially expected. So when you conduct an interview, the textbook shows you need to have a plan, right? Decide who is the person you're going to interview. So decide whom to interview. Decide what you should ask. Decide how to conduct your interview. Is it going to be via Skype? Is it going to be face-to-face? Is it going to be through email? Decide whether to share questions in advance. And that's a good one because sometimes you don't want to give your questions in advance if you're trying to catch them in lies or to see contradictory information. It honestly depends on your audience and the subject to whom you're interviewing. And then decide how to record it. Are you going to be taking notes while you're asking questions? Are you going to audio record it? Are you going to film it? I would suggest that you audio record it at a minimum because you're not going to be able to take notes while the interviewee is answering your questions. How to conduct the interview. And then after you've conducted the interview, go back and analyze your results. Look for keywords, look for inconsistencies, look for those facts, those anecdotes that support your position. It's like a treasure hunt. It's really cool. So why do we observe people? We observe people for a lot of reasons, right? sometimes you're bored and you're waiting on somebody to show up and you're sitting on a bench and you're just watching what people are doing. And it's interesting, right, to see how people walk or how they go about their day on campus, what paths they take and so forth. When you're observing people, you're not interrupting their flow. You're not putting yourself or placing yourself within their environment. And so that also can provide a lot of information. So again, the textbook talks about how do you conduct your observation? Well, you need to have a plan, right? What are you going to observe? Who are you going to observe? What are you looking for? And then you also need to ask or consider whether you need to ask permission. You need to know what the laws are in terms of observations out in public versus observations when you're standing up to somebody's window. Hint, that's illegal. So don't do that. You also need to know what or where you plan to publish this information, because the publication may have standards of how you can observe people. The university actually has a process that you need to go through in order to survey students, survey people on campus, in classrooms, do observations and so forth. And so you need to get permission now. Then you conduct the observation. And then again, it's always important, analyze your results. So why should you conduct a survey? Well, surveys afford the opportunity to obtain information about beliefs and behavior. And when people are answering questions on a piece of paper and they're not having to verbally express their feelings, they tend to be a little bit more open and a little bit more honest. Surveys provide statistical data that you can input to create graphs and charts and so forth. And they tend not to be too comprehensive, right? A lot of surveys are, the questions are formed in very simple language. The response that you give is very simple, usually check boxes, radio buttons. Excuse me. Very rarely are you going to write an essay for it. And so surveys can be incredibly informative, but they're easy to do, and so people are more likely to do them. And again, you're seeing exactly what you've seen with the other two. Your textbook talks about how do you conduct the survey. Well, you need to plan the survey. Who are you going to ask? What demographic of people? Decide what to ask and how to ask it with integrity, right? You need to know your audience. If your audience, your dorm room, they're all believers on Bigfoot, you don't have to provide as much background information, right? And so you need to know these things. Are they skeptics? Are they, all in? Do they own the t-shirt? Decide or determine whether you're asking your questions clearly. If you get a lot of people asking what the question's really saying, maybe you need to just rewrite the question. And then you need to distribute the survey. Conduct the survey, collect the survey, and then analyze the survey. So for Essay 3, you are actually going to conduct 2 interviews and create a survey. The caveat here is you're not actually conducting the interviews or conducting the survey. What you're doing is you are going to come up with, identify 2 interview subjects and create the questions that you would ask him or her. And then you're going to create a survey. Now, I will tell you that if you actually conduct the interview or give out the survey, those responses can actually be items, they're genres for your multi-genre project. So you might want to do that as well. So we're going to take a look at, in the next video, the actual assignment, and then I'm going to show you some examples from 2 students of what I received.